Wonderful. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful day. Welcome to Mycelium Hub Sweden, and thank you, Tommi, for joining us in this beautiful forest nearby. I'm really quite grateful for how our connection has developed, and I really admire the work that you do in forestry, forest protection, Chaga production, and many, many more things, which I'm sure you'll tell us more about in a minute. And I just think it's quite remarkable how we connected over a comment on social media, and we continued the conversation, and we discussed different projects until now, a few months later, you're here sitting with us, and we've been able to spend some time together. And it's not a lot of time that you'll be here, but being in person, there's just something that you can really get a sense of who someone is, even more than through a Zoom call or WhatsApp chats. So welcome very much to Mycelium Hub Sweden.
Warm thanks, Milan, and so fantastic to be here, and thank you for the lovely hosting. And I also admire highly your studio setup. So it seems that it took some 8 years to set it up when the trees started growing and all the moss and everything grew here. So you have a very fantastic natural setup here. So happy to be sitting here with you in the podcast.
I think it's a very appropriate setting, and thanks for your appreciation and acknowledgement. This forest has been a topic in our conversations, and we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about that later, as well as the wider topic of how we treat our forests and how we can transform our relationships to the forest. You have a lot to share about that, and we had a nice walk yesterday where you've already made a lot of comments on the physical and non-physical and the seen and unseen aspects of this forest and these kinds of forest. I really learned a lot. But before we talk about the forest, let's find out a little bit about you, your background, your becoming. I see you as somewhat of a forest elf, and you really have that energy. And it's in some ways, I feel like we've walked on parallel paths, because you're in Finland. You've got your center there. You receive people. You do deep work. Let's say personal growth work. You're creating community. You're building relationships, and you're involved in a lot of things that we also care about at Mycelium Hub. Whether that is helping people transition from careers that aren't filling their hearts with joy, or whether it's about ways of being together, ways of holding space, having ceremony, or even how we treat the land and finding new ways to plant plants, mushrooms, or care for the landscape. But what has been your journey of coming to here? Do you want to give us a little bit of give us your story of how it started? What were the transformations for you? What were the inspirations, perhaps? And then where did you come to? And give us a picture of where you're at now and what your life is like now.
Very good. Thank you for the fantastic question and introduction. So my journey started in a rural village in Eastern Finland nearly 50 years ago. And then very standard story, decided to flee away from there, thinking that, I'm going to the world, and moving to the city, and went to the university, established my first IT company 30 years ago. And then 2005, I established a second company, so I have been very entrepreneurial for my whole life. Then things really changed 2010 when I was a CEO for my business, and I ended up to a burnout which was really transformative and life-changing for me. So even it was a bit radical at some point for the people around me, and following how I'm doing, the end result was really beautiful. So that was the time when I really connected with my true self, and I found values I want to follow, and I found more meaning in my life. And that was 15 years ago. At that time, I then found an intuitive vision on what I want to do, and I became a mentor. I started mentoring startups. I became interested on holistic well-being, applications related to human consciousness, about new emerging energy technologies, and working on those fields. At the same time, I have had my family forest in Eastern Finland, where I'm very much connected for my roots. And then during the last 5 years, I have started to spend more time there on my family ranch, and then wandering in the forest, spending time in the nature, doing log buildings, and planting chaga in my forest, which we will be talking more soon.
That's an epic story, and I think it's really cool how you've gone away from your home in the countryside to the city to follow the dream, right? Like, I'm going to build a business, going to have money, going to be successful in the world. Probably you wore a fancy suit, and then over time, through this sense of disconnection, burnout, you've actually rediscovered your roots, and you've gone back to what's the forest, what's the value of the forest, how do I relate to that? And then you've started to even redefine that. And so chaga is the thing that really created the connection point between us to begin with. And I'm really curious, like, how did chaga come into your life, and what role does it play now, and how do you see that developing in the future?
Thank you. So I have been interested on holistic well-being and food supplements and biohacking, different methodologies to make us to feel better, to live longer, live healthier, and live more happier life. And then this nutrition and the food supplements came into the picture maybe 10, 12 years ago. And there are a couple of really fantastic companies in Finland doing food supplements and compounds which you use daily. And that one which is easy to grow is chaga. So chaga is a medicinal mushroom growing on a birch tree, and it grows naturally and wildly in the forest. So if a birch tree gets a wound, it might be that it will be then infected with chaga. And you can find it also in forests here, like you have been collecting chaga as a mushroom. So I got interested on that, how we could utilize this resource from the forest in a sustainable way. And 5 years ago, 2020, when the pandemic hit us, I had boring time and I wanted to have something to do. So I obtained chaga dowels to be planted for my forest, and planted them springtime with my neighbor. So we made a small plantation and cultivation for 125 trunks. And it felt good. I thought that, well, soon I will be having cultivated chaga for friends and family. And then last year we started extending and scaling this operation together with Kääpä Forest, with whom we are cooperating with in Finland. And just last week we planted 2,000 trunks more in my forest plots. And it takes 10 years to grow them, so in about 10 years we will see what we got and how the harvest is going to be.
That's a long-term outlook, isn't it? I really admire the grounded perspective that it takes to start a project and say, hey, I'm gonna plant this now, and I'm gonna harvest it in 10 years. You know, it's a much longer harvest cycle than say planting some corn or things like that. But it is interesting to see how this relates with the forest and how forestry works. And one of the topics that brought us together and that really connects to the Chaga in terms of how do we use the forest has been the planned clear cut that is next to our property. So the land that we're sitting on this is not our land. It is land that we're allowed to be on, walk on, do a podcast on. And that is the law in Sweden. So as long as you don't create chaos, you can wander freely. And that's a beautiful law. And so we have enjoyed this forest. We've had people come into this, like from our property, walking down and coming into this part of the forest, and even further down that way. And when we were actually out walking in January, it was a snow and ice. It was probably 50 centimeters of snow. January is always a thick winter month. And we came up to our neighbor, and our neighbor said, "I have some bad news." And so he pulled out a map and showed us these red lines on the map. And the red lines were all of this forest, which is spruce forest, around 80 years, as you pinpointed, and you can look at them and tell how old they are. They were planted 80 years ago, and they're ready to be cut, according to the landowner. And we just found out by chance, right? And so for us, this was quite shocking because we've seen the clear cuts that take place in Sweden. And for those who don't know, Sweden is unusual in the sense that in Sweden you're allowed to make very large clear cuts of up to 100 hectares. And 100 hectares, if you know something about areas and sizes, that can be a whole hillside. It's a very, very big area that then is completely clear of forest, and everything's gone, not just the old trees, the little trees, the blueberry bushes. It's just like a bomb's hit, right? And so we've been seeing that, and we're a bit worried about it and thinking, this is disturbing and unsettling, but it's also what people have been doing here. And we didn't feel like there was anything we could do to address it, stop it. It's how people make money, and it's an intergenerational thing. So people plant these forests, and then the grandchildren harvest it, and they can maybe go on a trip or pay for their education, things like that. It's a kind of a bank for these families. But when we found out that the forest next to us is going to be treated in the same way, we started a process of research, and we contacted different people. We contacted the forest authority that regulates these things. We contacted the owner of the land, and we said, hey, let's have a talk. We want to find out what's going on. And through that, we found, and I'm sure you'll have a few comments on that as well, as a long-term forest owner through your family as well. But we found that he did give some explanations of why, and he said, well, it's a monoculture, and he said these spruce monocultures can get hit by beetle infestation, which will go through the forest very quickly, and they will make the wood quite worthless, and then you have to cut it anyway because now it's just a bunch of dead trees. But we just wanted to have a conversation about different ways to use the forest, and that was around the time, a few months after we'd found out, and we'd done a bit of research and trying to figure out what to do so that we could keep using at least some of the forest to have our retreats here, because this is a space that we take people into, not just to do podcasts, but to have ceremonies, or to look for mushrooms, or to just, some people will just go in it by themselves to enjoy the majestic peace that these trees give us. Spruce, monoculture, whatever, there's still trees of a good age that can give us a feeling of peace. And so we came to talk, and then your concept of how you produce chaga in the forests came up. And it was really interesting. This is kind of a turning point for us. We didn't manage to have a productive conversation with the forest owner because we're just these new foreigners that have arrived trying to tell him, hey, don't do this with your forest. And he owns the land and he has every right to do with it what he wants. Probably if he was allowed to burn it down, he could burn it down. I don't think Sweden would allow that, but you can pretty much do what you want if you own the land. But what's the economics of it? And that was so interesting to me. And that's where we had this conversation around chaga, and where I think your work really holds the potential to change the narratives of what forests mean to us economically. We know that biodiversity is important. We know that old growth forests are important as a reservoir for species. We know that they bind a lot of carbon. If you're worried about climate impacts, carbon buffers, older forests store more carbon under the ground. This is not widely acknowledged, and certainly the forestry companies don't acknowledge that. But economically, just on the pure numbers, I was really surprised to see that there's not a lot of money to be made from clearcutting because, yes, you make maybe 15,000, 20,000 euros per hectare. You gave me an estimate yesterday that was around 15,000 SEK per hectare. Then you have costs for replanting. When you produce chaga, the economics are different. And so do you want to comment a little bit on that and what you're doing to kind of change the perception of how we use forests and how we gain value economically from the forests?
Very good. Happy to do that, and using 3 different angles and linking that also to my personal story. So spruce tree forest, like this kind of 80 years old forest, it's an old and beautiful forest, but unfortunately it's not primary forest or ancient forest yet, so it can't be protected by the law. So the landowner, if they will, they can cut it down. And we have this challenge of the root rot and the beetle bug, which are then investing or invading the spruce tree forests, and then it makes sense to take them down before they rotten. And it is this sticky money problem. So for the private forest owner, if it's a question if I'm going to have 100,000 in my bank or not, it's then a tricky thing to discuss with them that, hey, they are the nature values and the forest elves are losing their home, or the nature will dramatically change when you are clear cutting it. And in this aged forest, one option would be thinning, but thinning in a spruce tree forest is old. It creates a challenge for beetle bug and root rot. So most likely then at some point they will hit the thinned forest. So there's no easy way out or easy option unless you buy the land and protect it by yourself. But then why this topic of clear cuts is very close to me. On the road to my ranch, which is 2 kilometers from my family home, there used to be 60, 70 years old, quite young pine tree forest. And then a local forestry company, Tornator, decided to take it down with 30 hectares of clear cut, which is in my neighborhood. On the road I will be living, I will be driving for the rest of my life. So that hit my heart last summer. So when I was first time driving through that clear-cutted land, I couldn't drive through. I needed to stop next from the piles of logs and cry out because of the death of the small forest. And that gave me more fuel and acceleration for the initiative I'm building, which is jointly owned forest called Jongun Yhteismetsä, which is about bringing together local private landowners and forest owners who possibly have inherited a family forest or in some other way got plots around my region. And it's really community-driven project, so that it's our village, our town, people from that region coming together. So that having that as a very local operation. And what we do there, we combine sustainable forestry together with protecting old forests. So the old forests, which are more than 1 hectare in land and older than 100 years, our goal is to protect them for the generations to come. Because if you want to produce new primary forest, you take prototype, which is 80 years, 100 years, and you leave it, let it be for another 100 years, then it can become primary forest. So it's a long process, so better to start early. And how the chaga cultivation comes to the picture. Chaga grows on quite young, from 25 to 50 years old birch tree forests, but its value add is high, so that you get the same return for the chaga cultivation in 10 years than you get for growing logs in the forest for 80 years. So we combine, bringing together plots that are suitable for sustainable forestry and for chaga growing, and then planting chaga there, and that gives the profit. But then the value or the money is protected with the value of the forest. And the financial model is built so that our goal is to protect 5% of the land and 10% of the wood mass, so that the old forests are a fraction of, or significant fraction of our land. And this is then supported by the will of private landowners. So that typically nobody conscious likes clear cuts. So people want to find sustainable ways to manage their forests, and then bringing them the opportunity to join the jointly owned forest, which is then doing the forest management in sustainable and long-term way.
Wow, thanks for that. That's really interesting. I have a couple of follow-up questions from what you've said. And the first one is around sustainable forestry. Is this some kind of greenwashing? Because I think a lot of people are suspicious when you talk about, oh, you know, it's going to be sustainable. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about the approach to forestry that is sustainable and how it's different from what's currently being done? Because I think a lot of people don't really know what's going on and what could be done different. And I think it's quite interesting if you could share that. And the second question is more around the Forestry Owner Association, where you have, so you're going to do the sustainable forestry and you're going to protect a percentage of land. And is the chaga production a part of that, or is that in addition to that? Do you want to explain how those two things kind of connect?
Very good, happy to do that. So at first, sustainable forestry. The main methodology there is to use continuous cover forestry, so that the forest is being grown in different ages. Even if we do thinning or occasionally we do harvesting of the bigger logs, there's all the time forest on the ground. So there are smaller trees or bigger trees which create a forest. So the land looks like a forest all the time. And there's this scientifically proven methodology for that. It applies to most of the forests or plots in Eastern Finland, not all of them. So occasionally it might be that we need to make a clear cut. For instance, if the forest is dying and the continuous cover forestry, it's not really fit for that region, but it's a rare case or exception. And how continuous cover forestry works: when a private landowner invites forestry company or harvesters to do thinning or work in their forest, they have a strong say on how the harvesting is being done. And it's really important then that the forest owner is capable and willing and has time and energy to talk with the people harvesting it, talking with the forestry company, buying the wood and selecting forestry company who is following sustainable forestry and also following certain certificates. And the most important thing is that the forest owner gets a direct link to a person harvesting the forest. So there are then very specific, even attention to detail instructions on which wood are being collected and how the trails are being made, and preferably so that the harvesting happens winter time, so it's better for the ground and things like that. And it is that some of the forest is commercial forest or like financially sustainable forest that supports then protecting some of the forests which are not being touched. So still there are harvesters going to a forest, but in a sustainable way. And it's really about discussion between the stakeholders there. Then jumping to the second question, there we have two entities. One is the jointly owned forest, which is actually it's not an association, but it's a business entity form existing in Finland. It has existed more than 100 years, and we have about 600-700 jointly owned forests in Finland as business entities. And it's special purpose vehicle for owning a forest. So it's not a cooperative, it's not a limited company, but it's a business entity for managing forest in a sustainable way. And Finnish state supports creating these because they want the forest plots to be together and bigger entities. So it has tax benefits. States or government pays all the fees for establishing one and running one. So it's a good way to have, for instance, 1,000 hectares or 2,000 hectares of forest where several forest owners are managing it together. And then on top of this, very much interlinked but separate, we have Healthy Forest Finland, which is an initiative which is then cultivating and planting chaga in the forests. And the system goes so that in Healthy Forest Finland we can invite people who would like to invest on sustainable forestry and especially to chaga cultivation, so that then the chaga cultivation gives them return on investment in 10 years and a nice one, maybe from 6 to 8% per year as an internal return rate. And the financial model is created as a forest bond, and this kind of investment where chaga cultivation gives the higher value add, and then the investment to the forest, it's actually a forest loan. So this enables local community and private landowners to buy more forest, to plant chaga and extend the area they are having. And very important thing here is that the local people and community, they are in dire straits financially, so many people are struggling with the finances, and the only thing they have as an asset is their family forest, and they are struggling on keeping the forest. So this enables them still to maintain the forest or even extending the land they are managing. So we are competing with Swedish forest funds and international forestry companies and so forth, betting on the forest plots. So it gives an opportunity to preserve the forests in local community ownership, so that the investors do not own the actual property, but they are making an investment which enables local community to preserve the land.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there, and I have a few comments and questions on what you've just shared. Super interesting from a number of perspectives. I think that having a way to having a different way to economically use forests, and what you're doing, the chaga is one, and I'm sure we can find other things as well that could be done with the forest by looking at the forest as a living system that can produce harvests of all kinds of beneficial plants, fungi, or tree pollen, or things like that. One of the things that strikes me about your work is the long-term perspective, and in connection with that it's really a task in education and governance, right? And it's an education around the way that forests operate, the difference between clearcutting and the even-aged forestry that the management toward clearcutting entails. So you have these kind of empty forests where every tree is the same age and they're very thin. They thin them out a lot. So for people to understand what options there are, what are the economic drawbacks or advantages of the different options, and then you talk about governance, which is to say we need to manage plots in larger areas and have people working together to manage that. So I really see that as a long-term task to educate people and show them that there are other ways of doing things, and that the short-term commercial profits the interesting thing for me, if I've understood you correctly, is that if we look at these forests from a short-term commercial perspective, we're actually, over time, going to make less money, right? So the short-term commercial focus is even less profitable, because what you said there, just to reflect back to you, is that we have around 8 times the return if we have a birch forest by producing chaga within that forest, which is just, it's not 20% more, it's not 50% more, it's like a multiple, it's an order of magnitude. I mean, that's just incredible. And I really like the fact that your model allows communities or land owners or forest owners to get something out of the forest and have this kind of a good return, a model with good returns with which they can then expand and do more of it, because so many communities here in Sweden are desperate for funding, and often clearcutting, whether they're landowners or local communities that have public land, is driven by economic desperation. And this is what happened with the clearcutting at my dad's village, New Kroppa, which is just a 20-minute drive from here. You won't be here long enough for us to go together and visit my dad, but maybe next time. Anyway, this is an economic desperation which caused them to clear cut, and in the community, quite old growth forest, which was even older than this. I think it was more around 120, 150 years old trees, and it was around where people walk and enjoy. It's kind of like cutting a park. And so again, you've got an approach which involves this long-term education, addressing the governance, and then transforming the economics of forest use. And what's so interesting to me is that because we're in the Nordics, you're in Finland, I'm in Sweden, but this forest is very familiar to you because it's the same kind of latitude, the same longitude, I should say. And so we can apply a lot of what you're doing in Sweden. And I think I'm very curious to find out more about how people can engage with your initiatives. You know, is there, you've got some information for these landowner associations and the chaga production model. So I think it would be really interesting to get this in front of people. And when it comes to the chaga production, you have also a vehicle for people to invest in that who don't own forest. Is this something that would be available to someone who isn't even, say, in Sweden? So like someone in another country could say, hey, I'm going to invest in this chaga production. And if that's possible, how can they inform themselves?
Very good. At the moment, we are pretty much like a small community working together, so the Healthy Forest Finland doesn't have online presence yet. But if you are interested on chaga cultivation, the easiest resources go to the Kaapa Forest, Kaapa forest.fi, and check on there. So they have good calculations and description on how the chaga cultivation works, some financial model projections and instructions. And the growing situation here in Sweden is a bit different. So, for instance, the terms, as I've understood, for getting your forest certified for biological or ecological production, they are a bit different. But it would be good to check with Kaapa folks on how they operate here. Then for the sustainable forestry, the term to search for is continuous cover forestry, and there are a couple of really good scientific papers and also layman terms written books about the topic. And it's a methodology which fits many forests, but not all of them. One of the key focus areas in Finland are forests where have been earlier swamps, and we have been then excavating ditches there and then drying swamp, because if that kind of land is being clear cutted, it releases tons and tons of CO2 when the rotten moss starts dissolving, and it's really a case where the continuous cover forestry is very important both for the climate change and from the forestry perspective. And then myself, I'm an open networker, so you can find me on LinkedIn, drop a note, and then if there's something interesting to talk, then I'm happy to have online call with people who are interested on the topics. For the longer run, for next 1 to 3 years, we're also looking at scaling the Chaga cultivation project and possibly tokenizing it, but it's in early phases. So at the moment we are running that as a simple business entity and getting the initial scale and pilot up and running with about 5,000 trunks to be planted this summer. But then later on, then scaling it to a bigger scale.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So good to know where that's all at, what the status of that is. Something that we've found once we got alerted to what's going to happen in our forest, which, by the way, we expected to already be gone, so we don't know why it's been delayed. Maybe they're just very busy, but we were told by mid-July. It's now the past that date. So the forest is still there, but in talking to, reaching out to people and saying, hey, this is what's going on, we actually discovered that there are a few Swedish people that are also concerned and that are trying to raise awareness. There was Sebastian Kirpu, and I think his surname, it sounds Finnish to me.
Yes, it's a bug.
So this is someone who's done a lot of research around forestry practices and told us that it's unlikely that we'll find protected species here, which is one of the paths that we could have pursued to try and discover something here that's protected, and then to say, well, we need to keep this forest so that the species can stay alive here. But he sent us information showing that a forest really starts to attract interesting species, he called it, after ages of 350 years plus. And it's a very, very long-term focus. As you said, it's best to start today, because it's going to take another 100 years, even if you have something like this, for it to start to resemble something like the original growth that we had. My point with that is these forest activists that are often educating people, and by the way, they get a lot of hateful comments on social media. There's a lot of people that get very angry when you start talking about what's going on with this clear cutting. Let's do it differently. They don't really want to change that. But what I think is a really interesting catalyst is for us to find ways for people to use the forest, which thanks for introducing your work with the Chaga, and we're going to do what we can to be part of that here and to do some of it and to find people to also start doing it here, notwithstanding the issue of organic certification. So that's more something for regulatory, and whatever contacts we have in that regard, we will definitely pass that on to say, to change the way we use forests, we need to be able to certify forests so that you can, whatever you harvest, whether it's Chaga or something else, you can say, hey, this is from an organic forest. Makes a big difference. But these forest activists, what if we can give them a toolkit, right? A way for them to also talk about other ways to do forestry, like the Forest Owners Association, that does continuous cover forestry, like you shared with us, that protects a percentage of the forest, like the Chaga production, so that these people aren't just activist troublemakers, annoying people that are telling us, no, you can't do that, but rather they're saying, don't be silly, don't cut your forest down, you're going to miss out. You're actually economically stupid to do that. Why don't you do this? you can make more money, and you can secure your property for the future. You can look after your family. All of the things you thought you would do with the clear cutting, but you can do it even better with these other things. So they start to show other possibilities. And so that's something that we hope to expand in working with you and getting this information to people here in Sweden and letting people around the world know that as well, because Sweden has this perception of, even I had it before I came to Sweden, untouched forest as far as the eye sees. Right? I just thought of like these incredibly pure forests with elk and deer in them and fish swimming in the rivers. And then when I came here and I saw a lot of clear cutting, I was quite surprised by that. Before we close, I wanted to offer you something that is a little reminder of Mycelium Hub and your time here. These T-shirts have a special journey behind them. They've traveled the world. They came to us in Mexico. They got stuck they came from Canada, and they got stuck in a snowstorm in Texas, of all places. They came to the UK, then to Sweden, then back to the UK, then back to Sweden. These T-shirts have traveled around a lot, and we feel like you're certainly a spore in the network and the mycelium that we're building, and you really embody the principles that we're working for. It's learning from the mycelium. It's the interconnectedness of everything. You said that you're an open networker, and thank you so much for connecting us already to some amazing people and projects. So we really appreciate that. And it's also this connection to the intuitive that you've also shared with us, and it's the connection to nature and this mindfulness and presence. It's so important, and we're holding a space for that. You're holding a space for that with you, and I hope that we can visit you on the ranch in Finland and see how you do it over there. I liked your approach to low EMF, taking people into a space that has no AI, no cell phone reception, no electromagnetic fields even. We do that here as far as we can. And so I think we've really touched on the things that are really connecting us and the things that our listeners are interested in and can benefit from. I just wonder if you could, in closing, perhaps share a few words or some insights on, if I'm now in your position, I'm the young Tommi, and I'm an engineer, I'm a CEO, I'm an accountant. I'm going to my job, and I've had some kind of experience. Maybe it was burnout, maybe it was something else. What is it that I could perhaps do to reconnect to the forest, to reconnect to myself, or to reconnect to a sense of something larger, if you want to call it the Great Spirit or a unified consciousness? What is something I can do to get moving on that path? Do you want to share something, or do you want to share anything from your journey for our listeners?
Yeah, happy to do that. And if you think about how mycelium works, mycelium is interconnected species, or here in the forest we can say that we have wood wide web. All the trees are connected through their roots, and they are individual trunks, but they are connected to the same mycelium and to the same nature body. And that's how we could and should also work. Think about ourselves as trunks in the forest, so that, for instance, my operation is pretty small scale. If in the long run we are going to have some 2,000 hectares in our jointly owned forest, that's a small plot in Eastern Finland, and nobody even notices it, but still acting locally and thinking globally, so that if more people like us start working with the projects which preserve the nature and bring the financial models for the sustainable forestry, then the magic happens. And in this kind of change, it doesn't make sense to build something some huge authoritative structure which is trying to protect millions of hectares, more like having family-owned forests, plots we can purchase, places where people really live in the forest they want to protect. Because it has been both proven scientifically, and it's self-evident that the people who best protect the forests are the people who are living in the forests, so they want to see the forest life. This forest where we are living at, this might be a bit sad story, so I really hope that next time when I'm visiting you guys wearing this beautiful shirt I just arrived here, I will be able to come and enjoy the birds singing and sun shining through the spruce trees, because it will be too heavy sunshine if the trees are not protecting us here. So my advice would be to go to a forest, spend time in the forest, connect with the nature, and bring your friends, bring your family, bring people you value to the forest, because then you really connect with everything that is, and especially with the magic of the nature. Because this kind of forest, how it influences us human beings, it's lowering our blood pressure, it's lowering our cortisol levels in our body, it's really making us balanced. And then if we go a bit to a metaphysical level, we human beings, we have special connection with pine tree. Pine tree is enjoying our worries. If people are worried, they are in a sorrow, or they have something in their heart, pine tree is our friend. It's like, oh, hello, human being. I enjoy you being in a pain. I will help you. And that's why, for instance, we Finns, we love our pine tree forests. And no worries, spruce trees. You are also our friends, but there's a bit different relationship with spruce trees. But starting from small, it doesn't count how small the action is or what you do, as long as you start doing something which is guided from your inner heart.
Thanks for sharing that. It's a good reminder I've actually got that relationship with fire sometimes, that when I'm sitting with the fire and I have my worries or my concerns and I feel like the fire wants to eat it, and it's like, oh, thank you, that's delicious, and eat it up and cleans my mind and cleans my heart so that I can just release that. One more point before we close that I was just thinking of as you're speaking. You, as a Finnish, you have a special relationship with the sauna. And you came and had a look at our sauna, and we've been trying to figure that out, like, oh, what do we do? It's not working, and we need to make some changes here. And you made some very helpful comments. Just to finish, what's your relationship with sauna, and what does it do for you, and how's it part of the retreats that you offer?
Thank you for that question. We need another hour to talk about, but summarizing it, sauna really goes in my bloodline since my dear late father was born in a smoke sauna. So in the rural regions, the sauna was the place to give birth and then to say farewells to people who deceased. And how it became more closely to my life and what I'm doing. About 10 years ago, I was in a transformative event, and there I started doing drummings into sauna, which my Estonian friend had been teaching me that, hey, you can take a natural skin healing drum to a sauna. And so what I do from my artistic side and in my alter ego is that I facilitate sauna rituals, guide meditations, do drumming into sauna. And I have also built several saunas around the world and in Finland. So I'm supporting people to create more of these heated meditation rooms, as we call in Finland. Because for us Finns, sauna is our place to connect with our true self, because that's the place where we are allowed to be in silence, we are allowed to connect with our feelings, we are allowed to ponder deeper things, and that's why it's so essential for us mentally. And then if we think about how it's influencing us physically, when we have the alteration of temperature, so you go to high heat, then you jump to a lake, you go to a high heat, you jump to a lake, it's a strong massage to your energy system, so it's balancing your sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And for instance, going to an ice bath and going to a sauna, it's one of the best stress relievers. So it's really good as an healing practice and holistic well-being practice. And then maybe for more practice than preaching is needed. So I hope that I will be enjoying good sauna soon with you.
Thanks, Tommi. I look forward to that. Maybe on the ranch.
Yep.
Or maybe next time you're here and we've got it up and running. Thanks to your input. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for going to the effort of coming and visiting us on your way to a festival. And I hope you have an amazing time there and connect with some interesting and inspiring people. I really can't wait to see what all of our conversations and shared threads develop into. We'll certainly keep developing that, and perhaps sometime down the road, we'll have another chat and see where it's all developed. So really appreciate that connection, and thanks for connecting on that initial thread, that initial comment, and keeping the connection alive and building it up to what it is so that you're now here. Really happy to have met you in person. Thank you.